From fighting 3 times a year to barely fighting once a year, the last time we saw Khamzat Chimaev in the octagon was in September 2022. Now, when will he make his potential return? Well, Boers recently announced the timeline for his return. The funny thing is, he did this without revealing the exact date. The Chechen-born Swede fighter has mentioned that he'll return after the holy month of Ramadan, which is a tradition observed by Muslims around the world as a period of fasting, prayer, and reflection. Chimaev wrote in a recent Instagram post how he'd be back after this period. So that's something to look forward to. And his return won't be long now, as the month of dawn to sunset fasting of Ramadan begins on the evening of March 22nd. It ends with the festival of Eid al-Fitr on the evening of April 22nd. We could be looking at a summer return if everything goes well. Khamzat is a devout Muslim, enough that he actually raised his voice against far-right Swedish politician Rasmus Paludan. This was when Paludan publicly burnt the Quran earlier this year. Regarding that, a fan criticized Boers for sporting the Swedish flag in his latest post. And that's not the only thing fans were unhappy about. Another fan took a dig at Chimaev's long absence from the octagon, as he was known for quick turnarounds until recently. A user by the name of McLovin1103 wrote, "Go from fighting 4 times in 2 months and now once a year? Seems like everyone wants the wolf back in the octagon to ragdoll another contender. But who could that be?" Well, let's talk about potential opponents for Khamzat's next fight. Considering he hasn't fought since a lopsided submission win over Kevin Holland at UFC 279, everyone's excited to see who he'll be facing next. Kevin Holland was the brave soul who came face-to-face against Boers, even if it wasn't for long. After all, the card was reshuffled at the last minute, as Chimaev missed weight by 7.5 pounds. This really gave more ammo to the critics of the Swedish fighter, who had a lot to say about Khamzat acting like he didn't care about missing weight. But since then, the 28-year-old has targeted multiple opponents, majorly focusing on the middleweight division. After all, he might be permanently going up, but let's talk about that later. The Chechen-born Swede went back and forth with Paulo Costa on social media, with real result. Plus, he's made multiple call-outs to Colby Covington, who's really been ducking fighters left and right. The most recent fighter Khamzat has set his eyes on is former middleweight champion Robert Whittaker. The two have had a back and forth on social media, and before his Instagram call-out.
And France itself is amazing. The fans blew me away. Thank you, Europe. They made walking out amazing. It was like being at home. It was so good. It was so good. I fed off the energy.
Chimaev stated in an interview that he'd like to face Whittaker next, and also accused Costa of ducking him. Boers told Red Corner MMA that he wanted to face Bobby Knuckles because he's got no other opponent. What's more, he thinks highly of Whittaker and feels like the Aussie doesn't trash talk or cross any lines. And of course, he's a great fighter.
I'm stoked with it. All the respect to Vittori. That's why I had to push back the fight the first time, because you needed the fitness to be able to hurt him the whole time. He did not go away. I was hurting him.
So Khamzat expects the two to have fun at the press conference and put on a good fight. But it's not just him. Whittaker seems interested in a fight against Chimaev too. Coming off a decision win over Marvin Vittori, the Grim Reaper is looking for his next target too. Who better than a man who has so much hype around him right now? I mean, Khamzat recently took to Instagram to call for a good guy versus bad guy bout against Whittaker. And the number 2 ranked middleweight has now responded to the call-out. Yep, he's willing to face the number 3 ranked welterweight. This could be a fight made in heaven, especially since both fighters haven't stepped inside the octagon since September 2022. While it was unfortunate that Whittaker versus Costa fell through, Khamzat hasn't had any luck whatsoever, even getting to the negotiation stage.
I make people hate fighting. I take the love out of it for them. As for who's next, I'm always gunning for that top spot. I'm just going to be lurking there waiting.
In fact, he offered Nate Diaz $2 million to fight him. When he missed weight ahead of UFC 279, he gave Nate Diaz a decision to make. The Stockton native decided not to take the fight. And honestly, he should be grateful. If Khamzat did to Nate what he did to Holland, the retirement would have been so much more painful. But it all worked out for Diaz, who's currently the most sought-after free agent in the sport after submitting Tony Ferguson. The Swedish star did register a win, but he recently outlined the steps his team took to try to keep the the original matchup intact. According to Chimaev, they offered Diaz a massive sum to go ahead with the fight. But here's the thing, Nate's representative claims that the offer never actually happened. Now here's my question, how much money would be enough for a fighter to face arguably the most dangerous man on the UFC roster? Speaking of dangerous men in the UFC, even Shavkat Rakhmonov is interested in a bout against Khamzat Chimaev. But for him, it won't be a big deal if it just doesn't happen. Shavkat hopes that he crosses paths with Boers, but he isn't focused on it right now. Like Chimaev, Rakhmonov is an unbeaten fighter who's torn through the welterweight division. He's someone to keep an eye on if you haven't been already. After Chimaev teased a move back up to middleweight, Rakhmonov might not get to fight him anytime soon, but he's not worried about it.
I don't know, we train every day like that, so I get that. My coach, Alan Cimento, like best grappler, best jiu-jitsu in the world, he make me that, you know.
After facing Jeff Neal at UFC 285 in an epic showdown, he's breaking through into title contention. It's no small feat that the 28-year-old has stopped every opponent he's faced. Neal never has been finished, and Rakhmonov managed to submit the fighter in round 3, so he's definitely getting closer and closer to the belt. Honestly, all of his potential matchups seem super interesting, like a fight against middleweight prospect Bo Nickel. Turns out, Khamzat Chimaev is a large betting favorite in a potential matchup against Bo Nickel. The Swede has been a dominant force so far in his UFC career, showcasing some incredible wrestling and even one-punch knockout power. So it's pretty unsurprising that there aren't many calling him out. But 3-time NCAA Division I national champion Bo Nickel is up for the challenge. A fight between the two is nowhere close to being done. I mean, Bo just won his promotional debut this past Saturday at UFC 285. Still, we do have betting odds. The odds makers are favoring the much more proven Chimaev here, and by a major amount. Khamzat can be found sporting a -300 money line, while Bo is on deck at a +250 underdog. Well, how can we talk about matchups and not include this?
Now I'm blooding, I'm tired, I feel a little pain, I love the.
Well, congratulations, sir. I look forward to seeing you in your next fight.
Thank you, my whole team.
I mean, Khamzat Chimaev versus Conor McGregor would be massive. Very few fighters have gotten the rising fame that Khamzat did. After dominating everyone in 2020, he's now a top contender, and the timing couldn't have been better. Conor McGregor has made his return to The Ultimate Fighter as a coach, and a fight with Michael Chandler is on the way. And Chimaev's coach, Andreas Michael, believes a matchup between the two would be about as big as it gets. Before any possible talks of Chimaev versus McGregor, the Irishman will first have to get through Chandler.
I could make that way, so the doctor stopped that. So yeah, what I could do now, and I was waiting what she said to me. That I said I want to fight, so I gave all my money to the guy. I said it was almost 2 million.
Plus, what weight the two will be fighting at is yet to be determined, but it's likely to be at 155 or 170 pounds. In either case, middleweight appears to be the next stop for Chimaev in the octagon, but he'll first focus on Ramadan. I mean, even Dana White wants Boers to permanently move to middleweight. After all, Chimaev believes that he deserves bigger fights with big paydays. So he could be looking at fights against fighters like Israel Adesanya, Alex Pereira, and Jared Cannonier. Well, there you have it. That's everything you need to know about Khamzat Chimaev's return to the octagon.